The bloodstains on Delilah Owens's dress never seemed to wash completely clean anymore. And as she stumbled through the door of her small room above the general store in Pahrump, Nevada, she wondered if perhaps that was fitting. She had spent the last 48 hours without sleep, tending to miners injured in a collapse at the silver mine just outside town, her fingers raw from stitching wounds and her back aching from bending over makeshift operating tables. It was September of 1882, and the town had grown rapidly with the mining boom, which meant more people, more accidents, and more demands on the only person with healing knowledge for 50 miles in any direction. Delilah was 23 years old, though she felt ancient most days. She had learned her craft from her mother, who had learned from her grandmother, a long line of women who understood herbs and medicines, who could set bones and deliver babies, who served their communities until they had nothing left to give. Her mother had died 2 years ago, worn down to nothing by the endless needs of others, and Delilah had taken up the mantle without question. It was what was expected, what was needed, and she had never been one to turn away from duty. She collapsed onto her narrow bed without even removing her boots, her eyes closing of their own accord. But sleep would not come easily. Her mind replayed every decision she had made in the past 2 days, questioning whether she had done enough, whether the young miner with the crushed leg would keep the limb, whether the older man with the head injury would wake up. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. A knock at her door made her groan. She could not do this anymore, not right now. She needed rest, needed silence, needed to remember what it felt like to simply exist without someone needing something from her. "Miss Owens," a male voice called through the door. "I know you must be tired, but my wife, she is having trouble with the baby. It is coming early and something does not feel right." Delilah forced herself upright, swaying slightly as the room spun around her. She pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to center herself, trying to find the strength to stand. She had to help. That was what she did. That was who she was. She made it to the door, opened it to see the panicked face of Thomas Miller, a farmer who lived on the outskirts of town. His eyes were wild with fear, and she could see he had ridden hard to get to her. Of course he had. Everyone always did. "Let me get my bag," she said, her voice sounding hollow even to her own ears. The ride to the Miller farm was torture. Every jolt of the wagon sent pain shooting through her exhausted body. She tried to focus on what she would need to do, mentally reviewing the supplies in her bag, thinking through possible complications. But her thoughts kept scattering like startled birds, refusing to settle into any coherent pattern. The delivery took 6 hours. The baby was breech, and turning it required every bit of skill and strength Delilah possessed. Her hands shook from exhaustion as she worked, and more than once she had to pause, close her eyes, and force herself to continue. But she did continue, because the alternative was unthinkable. Finally, as dawn broke over the Nevada desert, a healthy baby boy entered the world, his lusty cries filling the small farmhouse. Mrs. Miller wept with relief, reaching for Delilah's hand to squeeze it in gratitude. Mr. Miller tried to press money into her palm, but Delilah waved it away. She always waved it away. Money felt wrong somehow, like putting a price on something that should be freely given. "At least let me drive you back to town," Mr. Miller insisted. Delilah nodded because she genuinely did not think she could make the walk. The sun was fully up now, promising another scorching day. The landscape of sagebrush and distant mountains blurred as they traveled, and Delilah felt herself listing to one side, unable to maintain her balance even sitting down. "Miss Owens, you do not look well," Mr. Miller said, concern evident in his voice. When did you last eat? Delilah tried to remember. Had she eaten yesterday, the day before? She could not recall. I will be fine once I rest, she murmured. But when they reached Pahrump and Mr. Miller helped her down from the wagon, her legs simply gave out. She crumpled to the dusty street, darkness closing in around the edges of her vision. She heard voices, felt hands lifting her, and then everything went black. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Cool cloth on her forehead, the scent of coffee, low voices discussing her condition. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt weighted down, refusing to cooperate. How long has she been like this? A male voice asked, unfamiliar and deep with a slight drawl. She collapsed about 2 hours ago, another voice replied. This one she recognized as belonging to Mr. Chen, who owned the general store below her room. She had been delivering a baby all night after spending 2 days at the mine. She never stops, never rests. I keep telling her she is going to kill herself with this pace, but she will not listen. Someone needs to make her listen, the unfamiliar voice said firmly. This is beyond exhaustion. Her body is shutting down. Delilah wanted to protest, to insist she was fine, but forming words seemed impossible. Instead, she drifted away again, back into the darkness that felt both frightening and seductive in its promise of escape. The next time she woke, the room was dim with evening shadows. Her eyes managed to open this time, though everything remained hazy. A man sat in a chair beside her bed, a stranger with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He had a strong jaw and watchful eyes that were currently focused on a book in his lap, though she could tell from the tension in his shoulders that he was very aware of her. "Water," she croaked, her throat feeling like sandpaper. He immediately set the book aside and reached for a pitcher on the small table, pouring water into a tin cup. He slid his arm behind her shoulders, supporting her with surprising gentleness as he held the cup to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed. "Not too much at once or you will make yourself sick." The water was cool and sweet, the best thing Delilah had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but she obeyed his instruction, taking small sips until he pulled the cup away. "Who are you?" she asked as he lowered her back to the pillow. "Name is Samuel Lawson," he said. "I am a horse wrangler, passing through town on my way to California. Been here about a week, selling some stock to the ranches in the area. Why are you in my room?" "Because someone needed to stay with you, and everyone else in this town seems to think they have a claim on your time and energy. Figured you needed someone who had no intention of asking you for anything." Delilah blinked at him, processing this. "How long have I been unconscious?" "This is day 2. You have been in and out, mostly out. The doctor from Silver Springs came by yesterday, examined you, and said what you need most is rest, food, and someone to make sure you get both." "There is no doctor in Silver Springs," Delilah said automatically. "Doctor Harrison died 3 months ago. There is a new one. Young fellow just finished his training back east. He said you are severely malnourished and exhausted to the point of collapse. Said if you do not make some serious changes, you will not live to see 30. The words hit Delilah like a physical blow. She knew she had been tired, knew she had been pushing herself hard, but the idea that she might be literally working herself to death had never fully registered. Or perhaps it had, and she had simply chosen to ignore it, the way her mother had ignored the same signs. "I have responsibilities," she said weakly. "People depend on me." "People depend on you being alive," Samuel countered. "Dead healer does nobody any good." He had a point, though she did not particularly want to acknowledge it. She closed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion pulling at her again. "When did you last have a full night of sleep?" Samuel asked. Delilah tried to think back. Weeks? Months? She genuinely could not remember. And a proper meal. Again, she had no answer. Samuel made a sound that was half sigh, half grunt of frustration. Well, we are going to fix that starting now. Mr. Chen is bringing up some broth and you are going to drink every drop. Then you are going to sleep through the night without interruption. But if someone needs me, they can wait. They can go to the new doctor in Silver Springs. They can figure it out themselves. You are not leaving this bed until you have gotten at least 3 days of proper rest. You cannot tell me what to do, Delilah protested, though there was no heat in her words. She was too tired to be properly indignant. Watch me, Samuel said, and there was something in his tone that suggested he meant every word. True to his promise, Samuel appointed himself Delilah's guardian. When Mr. Chen brought up the broth, Samuel made sure she consumed all of it, even when she insisted she was too tired to eat. When someone knocked on the door asking for her help with a sick child, Samuel sent them away with directions to Silver Springs and instructions not to return unless it was a life or death emergency. That child might have needed me, Delilah said, guilt gnawing at her. That child has a mother who is perfectly capable of caring for a fever and upset stomach, which is what it sounded like. Not everything requires your intervention. You do not understand. I am all they have. You were all they had, Samuel corrected. Now there is a doctor in Silver Springs. That is only a few hours' ride. People managed before you, and they will manage now while you recover. Delilah wanted to argue, but sleep was already claiming her again. When she woke next, it was deep night, and a lamp burned low on the table. Samuel was still there, dozing in his chair, his long legs stretched out in front of him, and his arms crossed over his chest. She studied him in the flickering lamplight, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting against the sun, the calluses on his hands visible even from her bed, the easy strength in his frame that came from hard physical labor. Why was he doing this? He had said he was just passing through, that he had no connection to her or this town. What did he gain from spending his days and nights watching over a woman he did not even know? As if sensing her gaze, his eyes opened. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the small room. You should go, Delilah said softly. You must have better things to do than sit here watching me sleep. Actually, I finished my business here yesterday. Was planning to head out this morning, but then you went and collapsed in the street. He straightened in the chair, rolling his shoulders to work out the stiffness. Figured I could spare a few more days to make sure you did not kill yourself. That is not your responsibility. No, it is not, he agreed. But someone needs to take it on, and everyone else is too busy seeing you as their personal miracle worker to notice you are human. The observation was so accurate it stung. Delilah looked away, feeling tears prick at her eyes. She was so tired, not just physically but in her very soul. The weight of everyone's expectations, everyone's needs, had been crushing her for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to carry only her own burdens. "Hey," Samuel said softly, and she heard him move. A moment later he was sitting on the edge of her bed, his weight causing the mattress to dip. "I did not mean to upset you." "You did not," Delilah said, but her voice broke on the words and the tears spilled over despite her best efforts to contain them. "I am just so tired." "I know," he said, and his hand settled on her shoulder, warm and solid and steadying. "So rest. Let yourself rest." "I do not know how," she admitted. "Even when I try to sleep, my mind races. I keep thinking about all the things I should be doing, all the people who might need me. Those thoughts will still be there after you have rested, and you will be better equipped to handle them. Right now, you are running on empty, and that serves no one." Delilah knew he was right. Logically, she understood everything he was saying. But logic and emotion were different things, and emotionally she felt like she was failing everyone by lying here in bed. "Tell me about California," she said, desperate for a distraction from her spiraling thoughts. "Why are you heading there?" Samuel seemed to understand what she needed, settling more comfortably on the edge of the bed as he spoke. "Got a brother out there, runs a ranch near Sacramento. He has been after me for years to come work with him, help him expand the operation. Figure it is about time I stopped drifting and put down some roots. You have been drifting for a long time, since I was 18. I am 27 now, so nearly a decade. After my parents died, I could not stay in the place where everything reminded me of them. Started working my way west, picking up jobs wherever I could find them. Turned out I had a knack for working with horses, so I have been buying and selling stock, breaking wild Mustangs, that sort of thing." "Sounds like a lonely life," Delilah observed. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "It has been," he finally admitted. "But it was what I needed for a long time. The grief was too big, too raw. Being alone with it felt safer than trying to carry it around other people. But lately, I have been thinking maybe I have been alone long enough." There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that surprised her. Here was this strong, capable man admitting to loneliness and grief, showing her his own scars. It made her feel less alone in her own struggles. "I am sorry about your parents," she said. "I am sorry you are carrying so much on your own," he replied. They sat in companionable silence for a while, and Delilah felt some of the tension begin to ease from her body. There was something about Samuel's presence that made her feel safe, protected in a way she had not felt since her mother died. "You should sleep," he said eventually, rising from the bed. "I will be right here if you need anything." "You should sleep too," Delilah pointed out. "That chair cannot be comfortable. I have slept in worse places. Do not worry about me." But she did worry a little. This stranger who had appointed himself her guardian, who asked nothing of her except that she rest. It felt almost too good to be true, and part of her waited for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal what he really wanted from her. The next morning brought sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh bread. Delilah woke to find Samuel had gone out and returned with a small feast: bread, butter, jam, eggs, bacon, and fresh milk. "Where did all this come from?" she asked, sitting up slowly. Her head still felt fuzzy, but the bone-deep exhaustion had eased slightly. "The hotel dining room. I told them it was for the healer who saved half this town at one point or another, and they loaded me up with enough to feed an army." He arranged everything on a tray and brought it to her. "You are going to eat as much of this as you can manage." The food smelled incredible, and Delilah's stomach reminded her forcefully that she had been neglecting it. She reached for the bread, slathering it with butter and jam, and took a bite. The flavors exploded across her tongue, so good she almost moaned. "Easy," Samuel cautioned with a slight smile. "Do not make yourself sick." She forced herself to slow down, to savor each bite instead of wolfing everything down. Samuel watched her eat with an expression of satisfaction, like he had accomplished something important. "Have you eaten?" she asked between bites. "Already had my breakfast at the hotel. This is all for you." As she ate, there was another knock at the door. Samuel answered it, and Delilah heard a woman's anxious voice explaining that her husband had cut his hand badly while chopping wood and needed stitches. "Take him to Dr. Harrison in Silver Springs," Samuel said. "But Dr. Harrison is dead, and the new doctor is expensive. We cannot afford." Then wrap the wound tightly to stop the bleeding and come back in 3 days when Miss Owens is recovered. She cannot help anyone if she is dead." The woman sputtered protests, but Samuel was immovable. He closed the door firmly and returned to his chair, ignoring Delilah's stare. "That man might lose function in his hand if the wound is not properly treated," Delilah said. Then his wife will figure out a way to pay the doctor, or she will wait. You are not responsible for every person's problems, Delilah. It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his deep voice sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She set down the bread she had been eating, suddenly not hungry. "What?" Samuel asked, noticing her expression. "Nothing, No one calls me Delilah anymore. It is always Miss Owens or just Healer. I had almost forgotten I had a first name." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Well, you do have a first name, and it is a pretty one. Mind if I use it?" "No, I do not mind." Over the next 2 days, a pattern emerged. Samuel brought her food at regular intervals, insisting she eat even when she claimed not to be hungry. He turned away a steady stream of visitors, directing them to other solutions or telling them to return after Delilah had recovered. He read to her from a collection of newspapers he had acquired, telling her stories of the wider world beyond Pahrump, making her laugh with his commentary on ridiculous political debates and social gossip. And slowly, Delilah began to heal. The color returned to her cheeks. The dark circles under her eyes faded. She could sit up without the room spinning, could hold a conversation without fighting to keep her eyes open. Her body remembered what it felt like to be rested and fed, and it responded with gratitude. On the 3rd day, she woke feeling more like herself than she had in months. Samuel had dozed off in his chair, and she took the opportunity to really look at him. He was handsome, she admitted to herself, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with character. He had given her 3 days of his life, asking nothing in return, providing the care and protection she had been desperately needing without even realizing it. She found herself wondering what it would be like if he stayed, if this was not just a temporary respite but the beginning of something more. The thought surprised her with its intensity. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt more seen and understood by him than by anyone she had known for years. Samuel's eyes opened, and he caught her staring. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep. "Better." "Much better, actually." "Good. Do you think you are up for a walk? Getting outside might do you some good, get your blood moving." The idea of leaving her room, of stepping out into the world again, sent a small spike of anxiety through Delilah. What if someone saw her? What if they needed her help? But she pushed the anxiety aside. Samuel was right. She needed to start reclaiming her life, and that meant venturing beyond these 4 walls. "Yes, I would like that." Samuel helped her stand, his hand under her elbow until he was sure she was steady on her feet. She had been wearing the same dress for days, the one stained with old blood from the mine accident, and she grimaced at her reflection in the small mirror above her wash basin. "Give me a few minutes to make myself presentable," she said. Samuel nodded and stepped out into the hallway to give her privacy. Delilah washed as best she could with the basin of water, then changed into a clean dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had made years ago. She brushed out her long, dark hair and braided it, pinning the braid up in a practical style. When she looked in the mirror again, she barely recognized herself. The haunted, exhausted woman was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost healthy, almost whole. She opened the door to find Samuel waiting, and the expression on his face when he saw her made her heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "I look less like death," she corrected, but she smiled. They descended the stairs slowly, Delilah holding the railing as her legs remembered how to navigate steps. The general store was busy with afternoon customers, and several people looked up as she appeared. She could see the questions forming on their faces. see them preparing to approach her with their various ailments and requests. But Samuel stepped slightly in front of her, his presence a subtle barrier. "Miss Owens is recovering from a serious illness," he announced to the room at large. "She is not taking any new patients for at least another week. Anyone with urgent needs should travel to Silver Springs." There were grumbles and protests, but no one directly challenged him. Something about Samuel's demeanor discouraged argument. He guided Delilah through the store and out into the street, his hand at the small of her back. The September afternoon was warm but not oppressively hot, and a slight breeze carried the scent of sage and dust. Delilah stood for a moment just breathing it in, marveling at how different the world looked when she was not seeing it through a haze of exhaustion. "Which way?" Samuel asked. "There is a spot just outside of town, near the river. It is not much of a river most of the year, but there are some cottonwood trees that provide shade. I used to go there when I was younger, before everything got so busy." They walked slowly, Samuel matching his pace to hers. The town of Pahrump was small, consisting of a main street with a few businesses, houses scattered around the outskirts, and the mine operation in the hills beyond. As they walked, Delilah was aware of people watching them, and she wondered what conclusions they were drawing about her relationship with this stranger. The Cottonwood Grove was about half a mile from town, clustered around a small stream that flowed year-round from a spring in the hills. The trees provided dappled shade, and the sound of water over rocks was soothing. Delilah found a smooth boulder and sat down with a sigh of relief. The walk had tired her more than she wanted to admit, but it felt good to be out, to be moving. Samuel stood nearby, his eyes scanning their surroundings with the practiced awareness of someone accustomed to potential danger. After a moment, apparently satisfied that they were safe, he settled on a rock near hers. "This is a nice spot," he said. "My mother and I used to come here on Sunday afternoons, back when my father was still alive. We would have picnics, and my parents would tell me stories. It felt like the whole world was contained in this little grove, like nothing bad could touch us here." Delilah trailed her fingers in the cool water. "After my father died, we stopped coming as much. There was always too much work, too many people who needed us. And after my mother died, I stopped coming altogether. I think it hurt too much, remembering what I had lost." "What happened to your father?" Samuel asked gently. "Mining accident. One of the first after silver was discovered here. He was not a miner, he was a carpenter, but they needed support beams built quickly and he was trying to help. There was a collapse. He died instantly, they told us, did not suffer. I'm not sure if that was true or if they were just trying to make us feel better." "I am sorry. How old were you?" 14. "Young enough that I thought my mother would eventually recover and find happiness again, but old enough to know better. She just threw herself into her work, helping everyone else with their pain because she could not face her own. I watched her grind herself down to nothing, and then I did the same thing. Not very smart, was it? You were following the example set for you." "That is not about being smart or not smart. That is about being human and dealing with grief the only way you knew how." Delilah looked at him, surprised by his insight. "You understand." "I do. After my parents died, I ran. Just kept moving, kept working, never stayed anywhere long enough to feel anything. It took me years to realize I was not escaping the pain. I was just carrying it with me everywhere I went." "How did you finally stop running?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. "I am not sure I have yet. This trip to California to my brother's ranch, it feels like maybe the beginning of actually stopping. Putting down roots, building something instead of just drifting. But I will not lie, it scares me. Being still means feeling everything you have been avoiding." "Yes," Delilah breathed. "Exactly that. They sat in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Delilah felt something shifting inside her, some understanding crystallizing. She had been running too in her own way. Not physically like Samuel, but running from her grief by burying herself in other people's needs. As long as she was taking care of everyone else, she did not have to take care of herself, did not have to face the massive hole her parents' deaths had left in her life. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked. "That maybe I need to stop running too. That maybe I need to figure out who I am beyond being the healer everyone needs. But I do not know how to do that without feeling like I am abandoning people who depend on me." You start by setting boundaries, by saying no sometimes, by accepting that you cannot save everyone and that trying to do so will just destroy you. "That is hard," Delilah admitted. "Most worthwhile things are." They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Samuel told her more about his life on the road, about the places he had seen, and the people he had met. Delilah found herself laughing at his stories, some funny, some touching, all told with a dry wit that surprised her. She shared her own stories, memories of growing up in Pahrump, of learning healing from her mother, of the strange and wonderful people she had helped over the years. As darkness began to fall, Samuel stood and offered her his hand. "We should head back before it gets too dark to see the path." Delilah took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and his other hand came up to steady her, settling on her waist. For a moment they stood very close, his hands on her and her hands on his shoulders, balanced in the twilight. Delilah's breath caught as she looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart race. "Delilah," he said softly, and her name sounded like a prayer in his mouth. But then he stepped back, releasing her, though he kept one hand at her elbow to steady her as they walked. Delilah felt the loss of his warmth like a physical thing, but she told herself not to be foolish. Samuel had been kind to her, had cared for her when she needed it, but that did not mean he felt anything more than general compassion. He had said himself he was heading to California. This was just a temporary stop for him, nothing more. They walked back to town in near silence, though it was a comfortable quiet rather than an awkward one. When they reached the general store, Samuel guided her up the stairs to her room. He lit the lamp and checked to make sure everything was as it should be. "I am going to go get dinner for both of us," he said. "You stay here and rest. I will be back shortly." After he left, Delilah sat on her bed, her mind whirling. She felt simultaneously energized and exhausted, her body still recovering even as her spirit felt more alive than it had in years. And threaded through everything was an awareness of Samuel, of the way her skin still tingled where he had touched her, of how safe she felt in his presence. She barely knew him. A handful of days was nothing, and yet she felt like she knew him in ways that mattered, like she understood something fundamental about who he was as a person. He was kind. He was steady. He saw her as a person, not just as a function to be utilized. And God help her, she was falling for him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt almost inevitable, like water flowing downhill. Of course she was falling for him. How could she not? He had appeared exactly when she needed someone, had given her exactly what she had been starving for, and asked nothing in return. But he was leaving. He had a brother in California, a life waiting for him. Pahrump was just a stop along his journey, and she was just someone who needed help. Once she was recovered, he would move on and she would go back to her life here. That was how things worked, unless it did not have to be that way. Unless there was another option, the thought sent a thrill of fear and excitement through her. Could she leave Pahrump? Could she walk away from the people who depended on her, from the role she had filled for so long? The new doctor in Silver Springs could take over her patients. The town would survive without her, but could she survive without it? Her entire identity was wrapped up in being the healer. Who was Delilah Owens without that? Samuel returned with dinner, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. They ate together, talking about nothing in particular, and then Samuel settled into his usual chair while Delilah prepared for bed. "You do not have to stay," she told him, though she desperately wanted him to. "I am feeling much better. I will be fine on my own. I will stay one more night, just to be sure. Tomorrow you can kick me out if you want." Delilah did not want that at all, but she did not know how to say so without revealing too much. Instead, she climbed into bed and pulled the thin blanket over herself. "Samuel," she said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything. I do not think I would have survived much longer if you had not intervened. You are stronger than you think, Delilah. You would have found a way, but I am glad I could help." She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him how much these past days had meant to her, how he had changed something fundamental in how she saw herself and her life. But the words stuck in her throat, too big and too frightening to release. So instead, she simply said goodnight and closed her eyes, listening to his quiet breathing across the room and letting it lull her to sleep. The next morning arrived too quickly. Delilah woke to find sunlight streaming through her window and Samuel's chair empty. For a moment panic seized her, the fear that he had left without saying goodbye, but then she heard footsteps on the stairs and he appeared carrying a basket. "Breakfast," he announced. "And I ran into the new doctor from Silver Springs. He was in town checking on the miners from the collapse. I told him you were recovering and asked if he would be willing to stop by and examine you, make sure you are on the right track." "That was not necessary," Delilah protested, but Samuel ignored her. "He will be here within the hour. Humor me, doctor." Richard Foster turned out to be a pleasant young man, probably around 30, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He examined Delilah thoroughly, asking questions about her symptoms, her eating and sleeping habits, and her medical history. "You are recovering well," he finally announced. But Mr. Lawson was right to be concerned. "You were in a dangerous state. If you had continued as you were, you would likely have had a complete physical breakdown within weeks, possibly fatal." He fixed her with a serious look. "You cannot continue practicing medicine the way you have been. You need to set limits, take days off, eat regular meals, sleep full nights. Otherwise, you will end up right back where you started." "I understand," Delilah said. "Do you?" "Because from what I hear, you have been giving everything away for free, working yourself to exhaustion, never turning anyone away. That is noble, Miss Owens, but it is also suicide. You cannot help anyone if you are dead." "That is what I told her," Samuel interjected, "Doctor." Foster nodded approvingly. "Smart man. Miss Owens, I want to propose something. I could use an assistant, someone with your knowledge and experience. The territory is growing and there is more than enough work for 2 medical practitioners. Come work with me in Silver Springs. Regular hours, fair pay, and I will not let you kill yourself with overwork." Delilah stared at him, stunned. "You want me to leave Pahrump. I want you to survive. And I think that means getting away from a situation where everyone sees you as their personal savior. A fresh start could be exactly what you need." After Dr. Foster left, Delilah sat in silence, her mind reeling. Leave Pahrump. Work with another doctor, have regular hours and fair pay and a life beyond endless service. It sounded almost too good to be true. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked. "That I cannot believe he offered me that it might be exactly what I need, but also that I am terrified. Change is terrifying, but staying where you are, that is its own kind of terror." Delilah looked at him, this man who had crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. "When are you leaving for California?" Something flickered across Samuel's face. "I was planning to leave tomorrow. I have delayed long enough and my brother is expecting me. Tomorrow. One more day and he would be gone, riding out of her life as quickly as he had entered it." The thought made Delilah's chest ache. "Will you stay today?" she asked. "I know I am recovered enough now, but I would like your company, if you can spare the time." "I can spare the time," Samuel said, and the way he looked at her made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was not alone in what she was feeling. They spent the day together, wandering through Pahrump, visiting the shops and greeting the people Delilah had served for so many years. Everywhere they went, people expressed their relief at seeing her up and about, their gratitude for all she had done. Several asked when she would be taking patients again, and each time Samuel fielded the question, saying she was considering her options. As the day wore on, Delilah found herself memorizing details about Samuel. The way he walked with a slight hitch in his left leg that he never mentioned. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way he was always aware of his surroundings, always positioned himself between her and any potential threat. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, giving her his full attention. She was falling in love with him. She knew it with certainty now, and the knowledge was both exhilarating and devastating. Because tomorrow he was leaving and she would likely never see him again. As evening approached, they returned to her room. Samuel had been quiet for the past hour, clearly wrestling with something. "Delilah," he finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you staying in Pahrump? If you could go anywhere, do anything, what would you choose?" The question hit her hard because she had been asking herself the same thing all day. "I honestly do not know. I have never let myself think that way. There was always my mother to care for, people who needed me, responsibilities I could not abandon. But now—" She trailed off, trying to find the words. "Now I think maybe I have been using those responsibilities as an excuse to avoid figuring out what I actually want." "And what do you want?" "I want to wake up in the morning and not feel crushed by obligation. I want to practice healing because I choose to, not because I am the only option. I want to eat meals with friends, take walks, read books, have conversations that are not about symptoms and treatments. I want a life, Samuel. I want my own life. You could have that in Silver Springs working with Dr. Foster." "I could," she agreed. "It is a good offer and I would be foolish not to consider it seriously." Samuel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "There is another option." Delilah's heart began to pound. "What option?" "You could come with me." "To California. My brother's ranch is big enough that they could use a healer on staff. God knows ranch work results in enough injuries. And Sacramento is not far, a real city with a hospital where you could learn new techniques, work with other doctors. You would have support, structure, and you would not be carrying everything alone." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. "I know it is crazy," he continued. "We have only known each other a few days. But Delilah, these have been the best days I have had in years. Caring for you, talking with you, getting to know you, it has made me realize something. I do not want to say goodbye tomorrow. I do not want to walk away and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to come with me." Delilah stood, her legs shaking slightly. "Samuel, you do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "Think about it tonight. Tomorrow morning I will be leaving at dawn. If you decide you want to come with me, meet me at the stable. If you do not, that is okay too, I will understand. But I had to ask, I had to at least try." He started to leave, but Delilah reached out and caught his hand. He stopped, looking down at where their fingers intertwined. "I do not need until morning," she said softly. "I know my answer, you do." Yes, and it is yes. I want to go with you. The smile that broke across Samuel's face was like the sun coming out. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Delilah melted into the embrace. It felt like coming home, like finding something she had been searching for without even realizing it. "Are you sure?" he asked against her hair. "I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed. I am sure." Terrified but sure. I think maybe I need to do something terrifying. I have been playing it safe my whole life and it nearly killed me. Maybe it is time to take a risk. Samuel pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "I will take care of you," he said solemnly. "I will make sure you rest, make sure you eat, make sure you have the space to figure out who you are and what you want. You will not be alone in this." "I know," Delilah said, and she did know. She trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in a long time. "Delilah," he said, his voice rough, "can I kiss you?" In answer, she rose on her toes and closed the distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that was both tender and hungry, full of all the things they had not yet said to each other. Delilah's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and his arms tightened around her waist. The kiss deepened, and Delilah felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I think I am falling in love with you," he whispered. "I know it is too soon. I know it is crazy, but I think I have been falling since the moment I saw you collapse in the street, so small and brave and completely exhausted from giving everything to everyone else." "It is not too soon," Delilah said. "Or if it is, then I am crazy too, because I am falling in love with you as well. You saw me, Samuel. Not the healer, not the miracle worker, just me. You gave me permission to be human, to be imperfect, to need things. No one has done that for me in years." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally separated, Samuel's eyes were bright. "We should probably both get some sleep," he said reluctantly. "We have a long journey ahead of us tomorrow." "Stay," Delilah said impulsively. "Just sleep, nothing else, I promise. But stay. I do not want to spend our last night in Pahrump apart." Samuel looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." They prepared for bed with the awkward awareness of new lovers, turning away to undress, moving carefully around each other in the small space. But once they were in the bed, the awkwardness faded. Samuel pulled Delilah against his chest, her head resting on his shoulder, and it felt utterly natural. "This is nice," Delilah murmured, already feeling sleep pulling at her. "It is," Samuel agreed, his hand stroking her hair. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is the first day of our new life." Delilah drifted off with a smile on her face, more content than she had been in years. They woke before dawn, moving quietly to avoid waking the other residents of the building. Delilah packed her few belongings, her clothes and her mother's medical books, her small collection of herbs and instruments. It all fit into a single bag, a somewhat pathetic summary of 23 years of life. "Travel light, start fresh," Samuel said, seeing her expression. "You can get new things in California, things you actually choose for yourself." They left a note for Mr. Chen, explaining that she was leaving and thanking him for his kindness over the years. Delilah also wrote a letter to Dr. Foster, apologizing for not taking his offer but recommending several women in town who might be trainable as his assistants. She felt a pang of guilt at leaving without proper goodbyes, but she knew if she tried to say farewell to everyone, she would never actually leave. They would convince her she was needed, and she would stay, and nothing would change. At the stable, Samuel's horses were waiting, already saddled. He had a string of 4 horses he was taking to California, along with provisions for the journey. He helped Delilah mount one of the gentler mares, making sure she was comfortable in the saddle. As they rode out of Pahrump, Delilah looked back once at the town that had been her whole world. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the buildings in shades of gold and pink. She felt a twist of grief at leaving, but it was tempered by excitement for what lay ahead. "Any regrets?" Samuel asked, riding beside her. "Not yet," Delilah said. "Ask me again in a few hours when I am sore from riding." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and they turned their faces west, toward California and their future. The journey to Sacramento took 3 weeks. They traveled at an easy pace, stopping frequently to rest the horses and to allow Delilah to adjust to long days in the saddle. Her body, still recovering from months of exhaustion, protested the first few days, and Samuel was patient, never pushing her beyond what she could handle. They talked as they rode, sharing stories and dreams, learning each other's histories in depth. Samuel told her about his childhood in Missouri, about parents who had loved each other deeply and instilled in him a strong sense of right and wrong. He talked about the guilt he still carried over their deaths, pneumonia that swept through their town, taking them within days of each other while he had been away working. "I should have been there," he said, staring at the horizon. "Maybe I could have saved them if I had been there." "Or maybe you would have died too," Delilah pointed out gently. "You cannot know. But carrying that guilt is not honoring their memories, Samuel. They would want you to live, to be happy." "That is what my brother keeps telling me. Maybe it is time I start believing it." Delilah shared her own stories, the happy memories from before her father died, and the harder years that followed. She talked about the pressure of being the only healer, about watching her mother work herself to death, and then following in her footsteps. "I think I was trying to keep her alive somehow," she admitted one evening as they sat by their campfire. "Like if I did everything exactly as she had, if I filled her role perfectly, then maybe she was not really gone. But all I did was lose myself in the process." "You are not lost anymore," Samuel said, reaching across the space between them to take her hand. "You are right here, and you are finding your way." At night, they would make camp and Samuel would hunt for their dinner while Delilah gathered firewood and prepared their campsite. They fell into an easy partnership, each contributing according to their skills. And every night, they would lay out their bedrolls close together, falling asleep holding hands beneath the vast canopy of stars. Slowly, carefully, their relationship deepened. Samuel was in no rush, content to let things develop naturally. He would steal kisses when they stopped to water the horses, would hold her close when the night air turned cold, would look at her with such warmth in his eyes that it made her breath catch. Delilah found herself blooming under his attention, becoming more confident, more herself. They passed through several towns along the way, and in each one Samuel made sure Delilah had opportunities to rest properly, to sleep in a real bed and eat hot meals. He was always thinking of her comfort, her needs, without making her feel weak or incapable. It was a delicate balance, and he navigated it perfectly. One evening, about 2 weeks into their journey, they stopped at a town large enough to have a hotel and a general store. Samuel booked 2 rooms, as he always did to preserve propriety, but after dinner Delilah found herself knocking on his door. He answered in his shirt sleeves, his hair damp from washing. "Delilah, is everything okay? Can I come in?" He stepped aside immediately, concern crossing his face. "Of course. What is wrong?" Delilah entered the room and turned to face him. "Nothing is wrong. I wanted to see you. We have been traveling together for 2 weeks, sleeping beside each other every night, and I feel like I know you better than I have known anyone. But there are still things I do not know, things I want to know." Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. "Like what?" "Like whether you meant what you said about falling in love with me. Because I meant what I said. I am in love with you, Samuel, completely, terrifyingly in love with you." Samuel closed the distance between them in 2 steps, his hands cupping her face. "I meant every word. I love you, Delilah. I think I loved you from the moment you tried to stand up after collapsing and insisted you had to help that farmer's wife. You were so determined, so selfless, and I just wanted to take care of you, to give you what you had been giving everyone else." Delilah felt tears prick at her eyes. "No one has ever wanted to take care of me before. Then they were all fools. You deserve to be cherished, Delilah. You deserve to be someone's priority. And am I your priority? You are the most important thing in my world right now," Samuel said seriously. "Everything else comes second." Delilah kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. Samuel responded in kind, his arms wrapping around her, holding her like she was precious. The kiss grew heated, and Delilah felt desire unfurl in her belly, warm and insistent. "Delilah," Samuel murmured against her lips, "we should stop. I do not want to dishonor you." "You could never dishonor me," she said. "Samuel, I want this. I want you. We may not be married, but we will be. I know that as surely as I know my own name, and I do not want to wait any more. Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." Samuel swept her up in his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently. What followed was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Samuel was careful with her, attentive to her reactions, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally came together, Delilah felt something click into place, like a piece of herself she had not realized was missing had finally been found. Afterward, they lay tangled together, their hearts gradually slowing. Samuel pressed kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, her nose. "I love you," he whispered. "My brave, beautiful healer." "I love you too," Delilah replied, feeling happier than she could remember being in years. "My steady, kind cowboy." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, and when morning came they faced it together, ready for whatever the day would bring. The final week of their journey passed in a blur of happiness. Delilah felt like she was walking on air, so full of love and hope for the future that sometimes she could barely contain it. Samuel was equally joyful, always finding excuses to touch her, to make her smile, to remind her that she was loved. When they finally crossed into California and began making their way toward Sacramento, Samuel grew noticeably more energized. "Tell me about your brother," Delilah said as they rode. "His name is Matthew. He is 2 years older than me. After our parents died, he headed west almost immediately. I think he could not bear to stay in Missouri any more than I could. He found work on a ranch outside Sacramento, and over the years he saved enough to buy his own land. Started with 100 acres and now he is up to 500. Raises horses and cattle, has a good operation going." "Is he married?" "He was. His wife died in childbirth 3 years ago along with the baby. He took it hard, threw himself into the ranch. I have been worried about him, honestly. He writes regularly, but his letters are always about work, never about how he is actually doing." "That sounds familiar," Delilah observed. "It does it not? We Lawson men apparently have a tendency to bury our grief in work. Good thing we have you now to keep us honest." They arrived at the ranch on a warm October afternoon. The property was beautiful, with rolling hills dotted with oak trees, good pasture land, and a solid house built of wood and stone. As they rode up the main path, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. "Samuel," he called, disbelief in his voice. "Samuel, is that really you?" "It is really me, Matthew," Samuel called back, dismounting and walking to meet his brother. The 2 men embraced, pounding each other on the back in the way of men who are deeply moved but trying not to show it. When they pulled apart, Delilah could see tears in both their eyes. "I thought you would never actually come," Matthew said. I thought you would keep drifting forever. I almost did, but then I found a reason to stop." Samuel turned and gestured for Delilah to dismount. "Matthew, this is Delilah Owens. Delilah, my brother Matthew." Matthew looked at Delilah with open curiosity, then back at Samuel. "You found a reason to stop." "I found everything," Samuel said simply, looking at Delilah with such love that she felt herself blush. Over dinner that evening, they told Matthew the whole story, how they had met, how Samuel had cared for Delilah, how they had fallen in love. Matthew listened with a smile growing on his face. "Well, it is about time someone got through to you," he told Samuel. "I was starting to think you would be alone forever." "I was thinking the same about you," Samuel countered. "How are you really doing, Matthew?" The smile faded from Matthew's face. "I am managing. Some days are better than others, but I am glad you are here." "It gets lonely sometimes, just me and the ranch hands." "You will not be lonely anymore," Samuel promised. "We are here to stay." True to his word, Samuel settled into life on the ranch. He worked alongside Matthew and the ranch hands, using his skills with horses to help train and break the wild mustangs they brought in. Delilah, meanwhile, found her niche caring for the various injuries and illnesses that arose. A ranch, she quickly learned, was a dangerous place, with plenty of opportunities for broken bones, cuts, bruises, and animal-related injuries. But unlike in Pahrump, she was not alone. When someone needed medical care beyond her abilities, they could go to the hospital in Sacramento, only a few hours away. And Samuel was always there, making sure she took breaks, insisting she eat regular meals, reminding her that she was allowed to say no. The ranch became home faster than Delilah had anticipated. She loved the rhythm of the days, the physical work balanced with time to read and learn and grow. She began taking trips into Sacramento to visit the hospital there, watching the doctors work, learning new techniques, expanding her knowledge. Dr. Williams, the head of surgery, took an interest in her and began inviting her to observe his procedures, explaining his methods and answering her endless questions. "You have a gift for this," Dr. Williams told her one day. "Have you ever considered becoming a proper doctor, getting formal training?" The idea had never occurred to Delilah. Women doctors were rare, though not unheard of. "I do not know if I could," she admitted. "The cost alone." "There are scholarships, programs specifically for women interested in medicine, and I would be happy to write you a recommendation. Think about it." Delilah did think about it, bringing it up with Samuel that evening as they walked through the pastures together. "What do you think?" she asked. "Is it crazy to consider medical school at my age?" "You are 23, not ancient," Samuel said with a smile. "And I think you would be an amazing doctor. You already have more practical experience than most medical students. The formal training would just build on what you already know. But it would mean time away, probably going back east for school. I do not want to leave you." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Delilah, I want you to have everything you have ever dreamed of. If that includes medical school, we will figure out how to make it work. Maybe I come with you. Maybe we arrange for you to do some of your training in California, but we will figure it out together. You would come with me. Leave the ranch. Matthew can manage without me for a while. And besides, I am not letting you go. Where you go, I go. We are in this together." Delilah kissed him, overwhelmed by his support. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I ask myself the same thing every day," Samuel replied. "Now there is something else I want to talk to you about." "What?" Samuel took a deep breath, and Delilah realized he was nervous. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "We have been here for 2 months now. I have watched you bloom into the person you were always meant to be. You are happy, healthy, pursuing your dreams, and I love you more every single day." "Delilah Owens, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire set in it. It was not ostentatious or expensive, but it was beautiful and clearly chosen with care. Delilah felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger and then swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed and cried. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with such passion that Delilah felt her knees go weak. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are." "I already know," Delilah said. "You have been showing me since the day we met." They were married a month later in Sacramento, in a small church with Matthew and Dr. Williams as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple white dress she had made herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Samuel wore his best suit, looking more handsome than should be legal. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, Delilah felt a peace settle over her that she had never known before. This was right. This was what she was meant for. Not just healing, though that would always be part of who she was, but this partnership, this love, this life they were building together. After the wedding, they returned to the ranch and settled into married life. Delilah continued her work with Dr. Williams, and with his recommendation and support, she applied to and was accepted into a special program at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. The program allowed her to do most of her training in California, traveling back east only for examinations and intensive coursework. Samuel kept his promise, supporting her every step of the way. When she had to travel for school, he went with her, finding temporary work wherever they landed. When she was overwhelmed with studying, he made sure she ate and slept and took breaks. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of all she had already accomplished. 4 years after their wedding, Delilah graduated as a fully licensed physician. At 27 years old, she was one of the few female doctors in California, and she was determined to use her position to help as many people as possible. She and Samuel, along with Matthew, decided to expand the ranch operation to include a small clinic. They built a dedicated building for medical care, and Delilah began seeing patients from the surrounding area. She charged fair rates, never turning anyone away who could not pay, but she also had Samuel to gently remind her to set boundaries, to take days off, to maintain the balance between service and self-care. Life was good. Better than good, it was everything Delilah had never let herself dream of. She had meaningful work, a supportive community, and a husband who loved her with a devotion that still took her breath away. 2 years after she opened her clinic, Delilah realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. Samuel was ecstatic, already planning how they would convert one of the bedrooms into a nursery, talking about teaching their child to ride and about passing on his father's watch. "What if I am not a good mother?" Delilah asked one evening, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "What if I do not know how to balance being a doctor and being a mother?" "You will figure it out, just like you have figured out everything else," Samuel said, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands. "And you will not be doing it alone. I am here, Matthew is here, we have friends and neighbors who will help. Our child is going to be so loved, Delilah. That is what matters most." Their son was born in the spring of 1889, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's eyes. They named him David, after Delilah's father, and he brought a joy into their lives that neither of them had anticipated. Watching Samuel with their son, seeing the tenderness and patience he displayed, made Delilah fall in love with him all over again. As she had feared, Balancing motherhood and her medical practice was challenging. But Samuel had been right. She was not alone. He took on significant child-rearing duties, as comfortable changing diapers as he was breaking horses. Matthew proved to be a devoted uncle, always willing to watch David when both parents needed to work. And Delilah learned, slowly, that it was okay to ask for help, to admit when she was overwhelmed, to take time for herself without guilt. 3 years after David's birth, Delilah gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Rose. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos and love. Delilah reduced her clinic hours to part-time, focusing more on training other women who wanted to become healers or midwives. She published several papers on frontier medicine, sharing the techniques she had developed over years of practice. Samuel expanded the horse operation and began breeding stock specifically for temperament and endurance. The Lawson Ranch became known throughout California for quality horses and expert medical care. Matthew eventually remarried to a widow named Sarah who had 2 children of her own, and the ranch became home to a sprawling, joyful extended family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Delilah back to the spot where he had proposed, the same pasture with the same oak trees. Their children were with Matthew and Sarah for the evening, giving them rare time alone together. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in Pahrump when I asked what you wanted?" Samuel said, pulling her close as they watched the sun set over the hills. "I said I wanted a life," Delilah replied. "My own life, not one defined by everyone else's needs. And do you have that now?" Delilah looked at her husband, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, who had given her rest when she was exhausted, who had loved her into wholeness. "I have so much more than that. I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. I have work that fulfills me, children who amaze me, a family I adore. But most of all, I have you, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Samuel said, kissing her softly. "You gave me a reason to stop running, Delilah. You gave me a home, a purpose, a future worth living. I thank God every day that I happened to be in Pahrump when you collapsed in that street. I used to think I needed to earn love by being useful, by serving others until I had nothing left," Delilah said. "You taught me that I deserved love just for being myself. That was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They stood together as darkness fell. 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built a life based on mutual respect, support, and deep, abiding love. The ranch lights glowed in the distance, calling them home to the life they had created together. As they walked back hand in hand, Delilah thought about the exhausted, despairing young woman she had been 10 years ago. She barely recognized that person anymore. That woman had been so lost, so depleted, so convinced that her only value lay in what she could give to others. It had taken Samuel's intervention, his insistence that she rest, that she matter, to begin the process of healing. And now here she was, a doctor, a wife, a mother, a woman who had learned to balance service with self-care, who had built a life that honored both her desire to help others and her need to care for herself. It had not been easy. There had been struggles, moments of doubt, times when the old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But Samuel had been there every step of the way, a steady presence reminding her that she was loved for who she was, not what she did. Over the years that followed, the Lawson Ranch continued to thrive. David grew into a thoughtful young man with a gift for working with horses like his father. The twins, Emma and Rose, developed their own distinct personalities, Emma drawn to medicine like her mother while Rose showed an aptitude for business that impressed everyone. Delilah and Samuel eventually had 2 more children, another boy and girl, rounding out their family at 6 children. Delilah's clinic became a training ground for women interested in medicine. She took on apprentices, teaching them not just the technical skills, but also the importance of self-care and boundaries. She was determined that no other young healer would work herself to near death the way she had, and she used her own story as a cautionary tale. Samuel's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and buyers came from all over California and beyond to purchase Lawson Ranch stock. But no matter how successful the ranch became, Samuel never lost sight of what mattered most. Every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, he made time to sit with Delilah to talk about their day, to reconnect. He continued to be her greatest supporter, celebrating her successes and comforting her through failures. Matthew and Sarah's family blended beautifully with their own, creating a large, boisterous clan that gathered for Sunday dinners and holidays. The children all grew up together, as close as siblings even when they were technically cousins or step-siblings. It was the family Delilah had dreamed of, but never thought she would have, full of love and laughter and support. As the years passed and Delilah and Samuel grew older, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Their passion for each other never dimmed, though it evolved from the intense, new love of their early years into something deeper and more sustaining. They knew each other's thoughts, could communicate with a glance, moved through life as a united team. When Delilah turned 40, Samuel planned a surprise celebration, gathering friends and family from near and far. As she looked around the room at all the people she loved, all the lives she had touched, she felt overwhelming gratitude. This life, this beautiful, full, rich life, had almost not happened. If Samuel had not been in Pahrump that day, if he had not insisted she rest, she might have worked herself to death like her mother before her. In her speech that evening, Delilah talked about that turning point, about the exhausted young woman who had collapsed in the street and the cowboy who had tended to her and given her rest. She talked about how sometimes the greatest act of service we can offer the world is taking care of ourselves, so that we can continue to serve from a place of abundance rather than depletion. "Samuel gave me my life back," she said, looking at her husband with tears in her eyes. "And then he helped me build something even better than what I had before. He taught me that I deserved to be cared for, that love was not something I had to earn through exhaustion and sacrifice. That lesson changed everything." Samuel stood and crossed to her, taking her hands. "And you taught me that it was safe to stop running, safe to put down roots and build a future. You gave me a reason to believe in love and family again. We saved each other, Delilah. That is what love does." They kissed to the cheers and applause of their family and friends, and as the party continued around them, they stood together, still holding hands, still choosing each other, still building the life they had started together so many years ago. Years later, when they were in their 60s and their children were grown with families of their own, Delilah and Samuel would sit on the porch of the ranch house in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. They would talk about the past, remembering the day they met, marveling at the life they had built, counting their blessings in the form of children and grandchildren and the deep, abiding love that had sustained them through every challenge. "You ever regret leaving Pahrump?" Samuel asked one evening. "Not for a single moment," Delilah replied. "That town nearly killed me with its needs. Here I found balance. I found myself. I found you. Best decision I ever made was delaying my trip to California to take care of a stubborn healer who did not know when to stop," Samuel said with a smile. "And the best decision I ever made was trusting a stranger enough to let him help me, and then brave enough to follow him into a new life." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, watching the day fade into night. The ranch was quiet now, most of the family having returned to their own homes after Sunday dinner. Somewhere in the distance, horses whinnied and cattle lowed, the sounds of the life they had built together. Delilah leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her, and thought about the long road that had brought them to this moment. All the struggles, all the joys, all the ordinary days that had added up to an extraordinary life. She thought about the young woman she had been, so lost and exhausted and alone. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything was going to be okay, that help was coming in the form of a dark-haired cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle heart. But then again, maybe that young woman had known on some level. Maybe that was why she had collapsed when she did, right where Samuel could see her. Maybe that was why she had let him help when she never let anyone help. Maybe some part of her had recognized that this was her last chance, and she had been brave enough to take it. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his voice rumbling through his chest. "How grateful I am," Delilah said simply. "For everything. For you, for our family, for this life." "I know I do not say it enough, but Samuel, you saved my life in every way that matters. You gave me rest when I was exhausted. You gave me love when I felt unlovable. You gave me a future when I could not see past the next patient, the next crisis. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "A home, a family, a purpose beyond just drifting from place to place. You taught me it was okay to feel things, to grieve what I had lost and build something new. You taught me that love was worth the risk of loss." We were both running in our own ways, and we found each other right when we needed to stop. They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. The same stars they had slept under during their journey to California all those decades ago. The same stars they would watch for as long as they both lived, side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart. Their story, Delilah thought, was proof that sometimes the best thing you could do for yourself and the world was to stop, to rest, to let someone care for you. From that rest came renewal, and from that renewal came the strength to build something beautiful. She had learned that lesson in the dusty streets of Pahrump, Nevada, when a cowboy had looked at her with compassion and decided she was worth saving. And oh, what a life they had built from that single act of kindness. What a glorious, full, rich life. As they finally rose to head inside for the night, Samuel pulled Delilah close one more time. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left." "I love you too," Delilah replied, her voice full of emotion. "My rescuer, my partner, my everything." They walked into the house together, into the warmth and light, into the life they had created through love and patience and unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night, enclosing them in safety and comfort and home. And in that moment, in that house on that ranch in California, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and deeply loved, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly what she had been searching for all along. Not just rest, though Samuel had given her that. Not just love, though they had that in abundance. But wholeness. The integration of all the parts of herself into someone who could heal and be healed, serve and be served, give and receive in equal measure. The exhausted healer from Pahrump was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who understood her limits, who had learned the vital lesson that you could not pour from an empty cup. And it was all because a cowboy had seen her, truly seen her, and had cared enough to insist she rest. That rest had been the beginning of everything.